Okay, welcome back. This is the Math 127 video for 11.4, which is shifted conics. So we're going to start with number 3. Okay, 3 says to identify the equation, and it gives us 12x squared plus 12y squared plus 48x minus 96y equals negative 71. Okay. So I have this. The easiest way to identify this is to put it into its standard form. So I'm going to complete the squares. So I'm going to rewrite this as a 12. The 12 is going to end up getting factored out of both the 12x squared and the 48x over there. So I'll write this as x squared plus 48 divided by 12 plus 4x. Leave your space. And then do your y's. I'm going to factor out that 12 from my y's, so that leaves me with a y squared. Minus 96, that leaves me with 8y. And then equals negative 71 on the other side of the equation. Right. So I can complete my squares. Half of 4 is 2, squared is 4 again, so I plus 4. But if I'm adding 4, I'm really adding 4 times 12, which is 48. So I have to add 48 to the other side. Half of 8 is 4, square it is 16. Okay, so while I'm adding a 16 here inside this parentheses, I'm really adding 16 times 12, so I have to add that to the other side. That, I didn't write that down, is 192. Okay. So on the left hand side I've got 12 multiplied by x plus 2 squared. That's the square that we just designed. Plus 12 multiplied by y minus 4 squared equals, and over there on the right hand side, I don't know what that is. That's $169. Okay. And then I would simply divide everything by 12. So divide this by 12, divide this by 12, divide this by 12, and I get this looks like a circle. X plus 2 squared plus y minus 4 squared is equal to, and this 169 is 13 times 13, so that can't simplify with a 12. So it's just that, it's 169 over 12, right? This is the square of the radius, right? So r is the square root of this, which would be 13 over, well, 2 root 3. That's not important because in this question we're just identifying what this is, and this is a circle, because it's some x squared, some y squared, right? Equals r squared. It's a circle centered at negative 2, 4 with kind of a yucky looking radius, but that's what it is, right? So the answer to number 3 is it's a circle. The next one was one of those ones where it gives you an equation and they have 5 or 6 questions about it. So that's, I think, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And the equation is this. We have x squared minus 4y squared minus 2x plus 16y equals 20. So we're going to complete the square on this to see what we're looking at, right? Or unless it tells us. I don't know if it tells us. You can tell though it's going to be a hyperbola because my x squared is positive and my y squared is negative. Whenever one's positive and the other is negative, you're going to end up with a hyperbola, right? But let's do it. Let's complete the square. So x squared minus 2x. If I half that, that's negative 1, and I square it, that's 1. And so I'm just going to add my 1 right now. For my y's, I'm going to take out a negative 4. That leaves me with a y squared. Take out a negative 4, that goes to negative 4y. And since I've added 1 already to the left, I'm going to add 1 to the right, so I have that plus 1. Half of negative 4 is negative 2, squared is positive 4, so I'm adding 4 inside this parenthesis, but that 4 times the negative 4 is really a negative 16, so I need to subtract 16 from the right-hand side. So I've designed this then to be x minus 1 squared minus 4 times y minus 2 squared is equal to 20 plus 1 is 21, minus 16 gives me 5. Okay. Now it's a hyperbola, so that means I want it to equal to 1, so I'm going to divide everything by 5. Okay. So this is all good. I've got x minus 1 squared over 5. I'll write this right here in green maybe. X minus 1 squared over 5 minus, and this 4, we don't like to see that up here. It doesn't cancel with the 5, but what I can do is take that 4 and put it as a denominator of the 5, as though I were taking the numerator and dividing it by a fraction, right? And so this would turn into y minus 2 squared over 5 over 4. So take a minute to convince yourselves that this is valid, that I can do this by saying what would happen if I had to take y minus 2 and divide it by 5/4 and say, well, flip that 5/4 and multiply, and you'll see that you'll get that we started with. So there's my equation. That is a hyperbola. I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to rewrite this, what's in green up at the top. That way we can carry on through the rest of the questions. So, question 4 asks us to find the center. The center's easy, it's 1, 2. HK, right? Take the opposite of these values here. Negative 1 goes to 1, negative 2 turns to 2. Right, that one's fairly easy. Number 5 then says find the foci. Right. There's going to be 2 foci, and we need C for that. So foci, we have C squared, which is just A squared plus B squared, where A is 5, or sorry, A squared is 5, and B squared is 5/4. So then this C squared is A squared is 5, B squared is 5/4, right? This is going to turn into 25 over 4. And that tells us that C is the square root of that, which you can see is 5 over 2, right? And then the foci happen 5 over 2 away from the center, right? But we need to know if we're going up and down or left and right. And since we have a positive x, right? Since my x is positive, my y is negative, that tells me that I have a hyperbola centered at 1, 2. So 1, 2. But it's a left and right opening hyperbola. So it's going to look like that. And if it looks like that, then my vertices are, or excuse me, my, are we doing vertices? Not yet. All right. My foci are 5/2 to the left of that point and 5/2 to the right of that point. So that is to say that this will happen at 1 minus 5/2, comma 2, right? My y value doesn't change, only my x value does here. And 1 plus 5/2, comma 2, right? So this is 2/2 minus 5/2, so this is negative 3/2, comma 2, and 2/2 again plus 5/2 is 7/2, and again comma 2. So write that down. I'm going to erase this because again I need more space for my board. Number 6 asks us to find the vertices, right? And the vertices, because this is a left and right hyperbola, the vertices happen at A to the left and the right of the center. So the vertices here, since A squared is 5, A is the square root of 5, so those vertices happen at 1 plus or minus the square root of 5 and 2. And then the last bit, number 7, asks us to find the asymptotes. And before we started shifting stuff, we had the asymptotes were just y equals plus or minus b over a or a over b, whichever the case may be. In our case, it's 5/4 over 5, right? But square root of those things. So it's b over a here. Right? But now that we've shifted it, we can still just shift this line. And that line gets shifted kind of in the same way you would think so, right? Y minus k equals, I have plus or minus, that should have been an x up there, but b over a times x minus h, right? X minus h is in parentheses, that b over a affects it. So I really want to figure out what b over a is, and then I can just plug in h and k into this, and I'm done, right? But b, we know is, b squared is 5/4, so that means b is the square root of 5/4, where a is the square root of 5. Right? And I'm going to leave them in this form because b over a is the root of 5/4 over 5, which I can write as the square root of 5 over the square root of 4 over the square root of 5 over 1. Flip this and multiply. This is 1 over root 5, which cancels with the numerator. And it leaves me with 1 over square root of 4, but that's just 1 over 2. And so plus or minus b over a is just plus or minus 1 over 2. So I'm going to erase a little bit here to give me some room to finish this up. That tells me then that I have y minus 2 is equal to plus or minus 1/2 times x minus 1, right? And if you just add 2 to both sides, you get the two forms that they have in the as your answers. This is y equals plus or minus 1 over 2 times x minus 1 plus 2. And you'll see that as a solution. Okay. The next one was a multi-part problem as well. So let's take a look at that. It's 8, 9, and 10, it looks like. The equation was 4x squared plus 25y squared minus 24x plus 250y, that's not pleasant, plus 561. I'm going to move the 561 just out of my way. It's an ugly number already. I want it out of my way as soon as I can get it out of my way. So there it is. It's out of my way. So I'll complete the squares. For my x's, I'm going to factor out a 4. That leaves me with an x squared. Move this guy over there. That's an 8. No, it's not. It's a 6. Give myself some space. My y's, I'm going to factor out a 25. So plus 25. Now we can see that this is going to be an ellipse. I think at this point you might be able to tell I've got an x squared that's positive, a y squared that's positive, but they have different numbers in front of them, and therefore it's going to stretch one more than the other, and therefore it's an ellipse. If I pull out the 25, that leaves me with a y squared, and then 10, so plus 10y. Give myself some room there, equals negative 561. Okay. So half of 6 is 3, square it is 9. So I'm adding 9, but I'm really adding 9 times 4, which is 36. So I'll add 36 to the other side. In here, half of 10 is 5, square it's 25. So I have plus 25, right? And 25 times 25 is, I want to say 625. It is. And so I'm going to add 625. So on the left, I get 4 multiplied by x minus 3 squared plus 25 multiplied by y plus 5 squared equals, I don't know, let's see, 625. Oops. That's nice, that's 100. And now that I know it's an ellipse, I'm going to divide everything by 100 to make it all equal to 1. So if I divide by 100, divide by 100, divide by 100, then I get x minus 3 squared, 4 and 10's, 100, excuse me, simplify to 25. 25 and 100 simplify to 4. Right. So you can see it's an ellipse. My major axis is going to go 5 left and right for my center, and my minor axis is going to go 2 up and down for my center, right? And I think that's what the first question is. Number 8 says, what is the center? So let me erase this, clear us out, rewrite this equation up here. We're now dealing with this. So number 8 says, what's the center? The center is easy. It's 3, negative 5. They asked for the center, right? Number 9 asks for the foci. Right, for the foci, I need c. In an ellipse, c squared is the larger value, right? 25 minus the smaller value. So c squared is 21, and therefore c is the square root of 21, right? And I should know that because x has the larger number under it, it gets stretched the further. So this is centered at 3, negative 5. There's my center, but it's going to get stretched out further in the x direction than it is in the y direction, and so the c is a left to right motion. And so from my center, I'm going to go plus or minus 21 root. So I go 3 plus or minus root 21, and my y value stays the same. And so there's my foci. Right? And those are somewhere in here, somewhere. Right. Whereas number 10 says where are the vertices, and those vertices happen at the center, but moved A, left and right. So that center was -3, but I'm going to add 5, and I'm going to subtract 5, and leave my, oops, that's the wrong number. That's a -5. Where's my eraser? Right. These guys you can simplify, so -3 plus 5, that's 2. And then -3 minus 5, that's -8. -5. So you should find those as your vertices. So that's all the questions that were asked. I hope that's helpful. The conic section in general is a weird thing to come across for the first time. So if this is your first time, you know, hopefully it's making some sense. Hopefully that made sense to go through these. Throw anything you have on discussion boards if you have other questions, and I will see you next time.